Okay, welcome to the B1 revision video. In this video I'm going to be going over all of the content for the B1 exam. Okay, this video is part 1. I'm not sure if I'm going to have 2 parts. I'm going to see how I get on. Hopefully I'll be able to get through the whole thing in one video. But if I can't, then there'll be a part 2 coming up, which you should be able to find quite easily. Okay, right, getting started. If this lets me. There we go. Right, starts off with blood pressure. Now, this is done right at the start of year 10. First thing you've got to know is blood is squeezed from the heart into the arteries. So there are obviously loads of pipes inside our bodies. Those are arteries, and the blood travels away from the heart through arteries all the way around the body and obviously back towards the heart through the veins. But we just need to know that the blood is pumped from the heart into the arteries. So the blood, when it comes out of the heart, is obviously has to be under a great deal of pressure. Okay, and the reason why it has to be under pressure is so it can reach all parts of the body. Like I've written here, what happens if the blood pressure is too low? Well, if the blood pressure is too low, then the blood might not be able to get to parts above the heart, like, for example, the brain. And if it does that, then you might faint. Okay, so blood pressure can't be too low. Okay, it just has to be within a perfect range. And obviously, this shows how your blood pressure might have been taken in the past. So there's this little Velcro strap which straps around your arm, and someone can take your blood pressure over there. I'm sure most of you had your blood pressure taken either by a doctor or maybe in school, because we've obviously done it in some science lessons. Okay, so when they take your blood pressure, they will give you 2 numbers. Okay, and we'll talk about those 2 numbers in a second, but the first thing you have to know is that blood pressure is measured in this mmHg, and what that actually stands for is millimeters of mercury. Okay, that's what the actual unit is to get it measured. Now, it has 2 numbers. Okay, one is a systolic pressure and the other one is the diastolic pressure. Okay, the systolic pressure is the higher number, okay, and that's the pressure on the arteries during your heartbeat, and then there is the diastolic, and that is between heartbeats. Okay, so for example, this is the systole, okay, or the systolic pressure. So when the heart is just beating, okay, you will have pressure on the arteries. Okay, and that will be the higher number, and this will be the diastolic pressure, and so this is when the heart is in between heartbeats, so obviously there's less pressure, so the number will be slightly lower. Okay, so blood pressure can be said like this, 95/60, or it can be written 95/60 like that. Okay, so remember, okay, you've got your systolic and your diastolic. The highest one, the higher number is the systolic one, and the lower one is the diastolic one, which is between heartbeats. Okay, now you need to know how to lower blood pressure. Okay, now these are all the ways in which you can lower blood pressure. First of all is taking up exercise. Okay, that will give you a stronger heart. Okay, and if the heart gets stronger, it will beat less, and so it will lower blood pressure. Balanced diet, which means not too much saturated fat in the diet. Okay, losing weight, because the more weight you have, the higher your blood pressure will be. So losing weight would be a good way to reduce blood pressure. Reduce your alcohol, not drink alcohol, reduce alcohol. That will lower your blood pressure, as well as reducing stress. Okay, those are the 5 main ways in which how you can reduce your blood pressure. Okay, right, now what you also need to know is I should have added this actually to over here, which is reduce your salt intake. Okay, so reduce the salt is another way to lower blood pressure. So what we're interested in now is how salt increases our blood pressure. Salt, it may be written as sodium chloride in the exam, or sometimes they just say sodium. There was a 6-mark question where they just referred to it as sodium, which I think confused some people. Okay, but what happens is when you eat more salt, okay, the body holds on to more water. This increases the amount of blood volume, because obviously when you eat salt, you drink some more water, and your body holds in more water. So if you've got more blood volume to pump around your body, that means it's going to be under more pressure. And so this results in your blood pressure being a little bit higher. Okay, now, fitness and health. Okay, now being healthy is just being free of disease. Okay, now most of you are healthy at the moment if you don't have any sort of colds or anything else like that, or being free of cardiovascular disease, something I'm going to talk about in a second. Okay, but your fitness is the ability to do physical activity. Okay, and fitness can be measured in 5 different ways. I'm going to talk about those now, so I'm just going to go forward into the slide and move back. So one of those ways is strength, which is the amount of weight that you can lift. Okay. Second way is flexibility. That's the amount of joint movement that you've got. Okay, obviously this person's very flexible, and this person is obviously stretching their hamstrings. Okay, which is the muscle right behind your quads and basically the back of your legs. Okay, stamina is the amount of time you can do sustained exercises. Mo Farah demonstrating that right there. Agility is the ability to change direction many times, and Messi did that. He does it all the time. When he's running at pace, he can suddenly change direction. Yeah. Okay, speed. Usain Bolt demonstrating that, fastest man on the planet. Speed, you can measure how fast you can actually run. Okay, and I'm going to go back. So those are the 5 main ways in which you can test how fit someone is. Yeah. So they are strength, flexibility, stamina, agility, and speed. Okay, now going back to this, we also have to know is we've talked about how salt can increase blood pressure, but now we need to know how smoking can increase blood pressure, and it does it through 2 main ways. Okay, one way is carbon monoxide. Now, the thing you have to know about carbon monoxide is that it's a poisonous gas. It binds to the red blood cells. That basically means that it sticks to the red blood cells and stops them from carrying oxygen. Now, your body detects the fact that your red blood cells aren't carrying as much oxygen, so it responds by increasing your heart rate. Okay, and if it obviously increases your heart rate, basically beats faster, that's going to increase your blood pressure. So this carbon monoxide limits how much oxygen you can carry, and your heartbeat obviously beats faster, increasing your blood pressure. And this is a diagram showing that. So this is a red blood cell, and obviously inside your red blood cell you've got this pigment called hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin attaches, normally oxygen would attach to it. Okay, so oxygen would attach to it and it can take it around the body. But what happens is carbon monoxide binds very tightly to this hemoglobin, stops any more oxygen being carried or carbon dioxide, and that is what increases your blood pressure. Second one, okay, about how smoking increases blood pressure is nicotine. Now, nicotine is a stimulant, a drug, and that makes the heart beat faster because obviously stimulates you. Okay, and it also narrows the artery, so again, blood pressure would increase. Okay, now we've been through these. Okay, now heart disease. Now, heart disease is about narrowing of the arteries. Okay, so your arteries get a little bit narrower. Okay, and that's not good. Okay, now heart disease is caused by saturated fat. Now, saturated fat contains something called cholesterol. Now, what cholesterol does is it sticks to the inner walls of the arteries, and that forms plaque. Okay, which is slightly different to the plaque that you get in your teeth. Okay, now plaque narrows the arteries, and that causes heart disease. Okay, but if the arteries are inside the heart, then they're called coronary arteries. So if those arteries inside the heart, which is supplying the heart with lots of blood so it can carry on pumping all day long, if it gets blocked, certain parts of the heart might die. Okay, now if certain parts of the heart might die, the heart will be weaker, and that can lead to a heart attack. So increasing the amount of saturated fat will allow more cholesterol into your heart, into your body. That cholesterol will stick to the inner walls of the artery, making them narrower. Okay, this is an example. This is a normal person's artery. Okay, no restriction right there. But when someone's been eating a lot of saturated fat, the cholesterol will build up, and the cholesterol will build up and form plaque, and obviously narrow the arteries. Okay, you may see it written as this, which is atherosclerosis. Okay, human health and diet. Okay, now you need to know what different parts of the diet, what a balanced diet basically is, and why you need different parts and what they do. Now, carbohydrates, things like breads, pasta, potatoes, that kind of thing, they are carbohydrates. Okay, and fats, things like, well, you know what fat is, like fats and oils. They are there basically for energy. Okay, you need protein for growth and repair. Okay, so you need to grow and repair, and you need protein to do that. And you need vitamins, like vitamin C, which prevents scurvy. You also need minerals, like, for example, iron is a mineral, and that is used to make hemoglobin, like I've already talked about inside the red blood cells. And by the way, another mineral is calcium. You need that for bones. You need fibre, okay, to prevent constipation. Constipation is where you find it very difficult to go to the toilet. Okay, and that's because the food isn't moving through your intestines. So if you increase the amount of fibre, like for example wholemeal bread, so basically anything with basically brown bread contains a lot of fibre, as well as lots of fruits and vegetables. They contain a lot of fibre and they can prevent constipation. And water is simply there to keep you dehydrated. You don't get any energy from water. There's nothing in it. It just prevents you from being dehydrated. So the main things you need in a balanced diet is carbohydrates and fats for energy, protein for growth and repair. You need vitamins, you need minerals, you need fibre, and you need water. Okay, now some people have some special diets. Okay, now what I mean by special diets is people like vegetarian. Okay, now vegetarians, I don't really need to explain it, but I will. Vegetarians are people that do not eat any meat. Okay, they just eat fruits and vegetables. Okay, and cheeses and stuff. A vegan is someone that doesn't. Not only do they not eat any meat, they also don't eat any dairy. Any product that comes from an animal, they won't eat that. Okay, and other special diets are religious diets. Okay, this is where, for example, Muslims, they only eat halal, which means the meat has to be blessed in a particular way, and Jewish people have to eat kosher foods. Okay, so those are examples of some special diets. Now, looking at the food chemistry of these different components, okay, this is carbohydrates, okay, otherwise known as starch. Now, starch molecule is basically just sugar molecules joined up together. Okay, now when you digest them, they break up and they pretty much just make glucose molecules. Okay, when the starch molecule gets broken up, it makes glucose molecules. Okay, now this is a protein molecule. Now the protein molecules are made up of amino acids. Okay, and obviously when you digest them, they turn back into amino acids and back into the bloodstream. Okay, yeah, you can see that here. This is the protein molecule, gets broken down into amino acids, and amino acids are rejoined inside your body to make the different kinds of proteins that you might need. Okay, this is fat. Now, you need to know that fat is made up of fatty acids and a molecule of glycerol. Okay, that's basically all you have to know. So for all of these, you have to know that carbohydrates are made up of all carbohydrates, all starch is made up of glucose molecules. You need to know proteins are made out of amino acids, and you'll notice that all the amino acids are different shapes, aren't they? Because you get 20 different amino acids. Okay, and fats are made out of glycerol and fatty acids. Okay, I won't bother explaining that. Okay, now moving on to BMI. Now, BMI stands for Body Mass Index. Now, this allows us to calculate if a person is underweight, normal weight, overweight, or obese. Okay, now this is the BMI chart. Now, if anyone has a BMI of lower than 18.5, they're underweight. If anyone has a BMI of 18.5 to 25, they're of a healthy weight. So this is the normal range of BMI that people are supposed to be in. Anything from 25 to 29.99 is overweight. Yes, basically 25 to 30. Anyone over 30 is obese. Okay, now what you'll need to do is you will need to be able to calculate BMI. Now this is the BMI equation. So you know when we talked about these numbers over here, they came from this calculation right here. Okay, now body mass index is calculated by someone's weight in kilograms. Now I can't stress this enough, it must be kilograms. It cannot be stones, it cannot be pounds, it must be kilograms. Now what you do is your kilograms are divided by your height squared. Again, in meters, not centimeters, not feet and inches, in meters. Okay, if they give you the question in centimeters, convert it to meters. So if someone's 170 centimeters, divide that by 100, it'll give you 1.7 meters. Now, some people might be a bit confused about what square means. Okay, it's height squared. Now, basically what that means is, another way of writing this equation is your weight divided by your height times your height. Okay, now, in fact, this is an example right here. If you're 175 centimeters tall and weigh 95 kilograms, what you do is 95 divided by 1.75 meters multiplied by 1.75 meters. Now, and that will give you a BMI. Now, let me make this a little bit easier for you. what I've seen in the past is that people get 95 kilograms and divide that by 0.75 and multiply that by 1.75. You do not want to do that. If I were you, I would write this out in an equation and write 95 and then do, in actual fact, do this. Do the lower numbers multiplied by each other, okay, and write that down, and then get the top number and then divide it by your square. Okay, don't do this all in a calculator. If I were you, do 1.75 or whatever the number is, multiply it by itself. Okay, write that down and then get the top number and then divide that by the number that you got to over here. Okay, and so for example, if you just want to have a go of this yourself to see, make sure that you're doing it right, this gives the answer of this, 35.95. Okay, or rounded up to 36, which obviously over 30 will tell the person that they're obese, and they'll need to do something about that. Another way in which you can calculate obese is by reading off a chart. Now, what you do with this chart is you get the person's height, okay, in centimeters, or they've given feet and inches here. So, for example, I'm 5'6". Maybe I shouldn't be broadcasting this. Okay, and what I'll do is I would look across here until I found my weight in kilograms. Now, I weigh, don't laugh, I weigh about 82 kilograms, so I'm here. Okay, so I'm 5'6". That puts me at a BMI of 29, so I'm very overweight. Okay, you may notice I'm not very far away from obese. Now you may be thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. Sob doesn't look anywhere near obese, and it's because I go to the gym. So if you've got more muscle mass than the average person, then BMI doesn't work well for you. There's one more group of people that doesn't work very well for, and that is pregnant people. Okay, because obviously they're carrying more mass with the baby. So it doesn't work with people, it doesn't work with any athletes or any bodybuilders, and it doesn't work with pregnant people. So BMI does have its limitations. Okay, right, next up is you have to be able to calculate protein. Okay, now you need to know the amount of protein an average person should be eating. Okay, now this is basically done. They will call this the EAR, by the way, as weird as it sounds. They used to call it the RDA, but you don't need to know it as the RDA anymore. You need to know it as the EAR. Now, EAR means estimated average requirement, because it can't be exact with this. Okay, so the estimated average requirement, so you can see an estimated average requirement, okay, is calculated by your body mass in kilograms multiplied by 0.6. So, for example, let me get my calculator up here because I can't do this in my head. So just doing this, I weigh 82 kilograms, so I would get 82 and I would multiply that by 0.6. Okay, and that will give me 49.2. You can do this on your own calculator if you want. And that is 49.2 grams. So I need 49.2 grams of protein every single day. Okay, now, why am I putting pictures of these people up? Now, these people, as you'll notice, have got very swelled up abdomens, haven't they? They've got very swollen stomachs. Okay, are these children fat? No, they are not. They are not fat. Okay, what that is water. Okay, now that's what normal individuals should look like, but a person with a disease called kwashiorkor disease has a swollen stomach. And that's not fat, that is water. Now, the reason why kwashiorkor happens is because it's caused by a lack of protein. It's not fat, okay, it's water. The lack of protein means that water can't be absorbed from the tissues, and so it enters the stomach. So you need to know that what happens if someone doesn't have enough protein, and if they don't have enough protein, then they might develop kwashiorkor. Now, this doesn't tend to happen in developed countries like the US, America, or most of Europe. This tends to happen in developing countries, very poor countries like, for example, Africa, even though that's continent, but poor countries in Africa might not get very much food, might not get very much protein, so they develop kwashiorkor disease. Okay, and that can be solved pretty quickly, actually, by giving them a dose of protein. Okay, now, moving on to infection and disease. Now, microorganisms can be good or microorganisms can be bad. Okay, now, when microorganisms are good, they make very nice things for us, like, for example, yeast can be able to make bread. Okay, bacteria can be used to make cheese from milk. Okay, yeast can also be able to make one of my favourite drinks, beer. Okay, but microorganisms can also be bad. Now, when microorganisms cause us harm, okay, we call them pathogens. Okay, they're still microorganisms, but if they cause us harm, we call them pathogens. Now, what you need to know is you need to know that there are 4 main groups of microorganisms and some examples of some diseases that they cause. So, for example, a fungi, okay, can give you athlete's foot. Okay, if anyone's had athlete's foot, it's like a yeasty thing growing on their foot. It's not very nice. Okay, oh, not that I've had it. No. Okay, bacteria. Okay, now you can develop cholera from drinking water if it contains the cholera bacteria in there. Okay, viruses. Most people have had the flu, also known as influenza, hence the flu bit in the middle. Okay, that's a virus. Okay, and there's a protozoa, and there's malaria. Okay, that's the disease it can cause. Okay, we're going to talk about malaria in a second. Okay, so those are the 4 main kinds: fungi, bacteria, viruses, and protozoa. These pathogens cause infectious disease. Now, what infectious disease means is that it can be caught from person to person, and they can be described as contagious. So if someone's contagious, it means that you can catch their pathogen off them. Okay, now, other thing you need to know is not all diseases are caused by pathogens. Some are inherited, and they can be passed on through your genetics through your parents, like, for example, red-green colour blindness or cancer. Now, cancer isn't a disease that can be passed on, so it's not contagious. It's caused by problems in your DNA, okay, caused by mutations, etc. Now, still talking about pathogens, the body tries to stop entry to pathogens, and there are 4 main ways that you need to know about how your body tries to stop entry of these pathogens. Number 1 is skin. Now, what happens is the skin provides a barrier to stop the pathogens from getting into the bloodstream. Okay, that's barrier number 1. The barrier number 2 is stomach acid. Now, if you've got stomach acid in your stomach and you've eaten some food, the stomach acid can kill all the bacteria in there. Not obviously not all of it, which is why some people do get food poisoning. But that is the second line of defense. A third line of defense is sticky mucus lining. Now, you get that all the way down your esophagus. Now, this sticky mucus basically traps airborne bacteria and traps it in the mucus. Okay, so it doesn't manage to make it down your airways into your lungs, but it gets stuck in the mucus, and what happens is you swallow that mucus, and that then sends it down into the stomach acid, which kills it. 4th one, blood clots. Now, that's when you cut your skin and you develop a scab. If a scab didn't form, there'd be an open entry for any pathogen to get into your bloodstream, and you don't want that, so your body's very clever and develops blood clots, which stops pathogens from getting into your bloodstream. Okay, right, vectors. Now, vectors are microorganisms like, for example, houseflies or mosquitoes. Now, they carry pathogens that cause disease. Now, this is very important, that these vectors, okay, just carry the microorganisms. They just carry the pathogens, but they do not carry the disease themselves. They carry the pathogens that cause the disease, and also they don't suffer from the disease themselves. Okay, now, malaria. Now, we talked about malaria, and we talked about how it was one of the 4 types of microorganisms, a protozoa. Okay, now, what malaria is it's caused by a protozoan called Plasmodium falciparum. Okay, now the Plasmodium, as known for short, is a parasite that feeds on us, and we are the host. Okay, and it is a parasite. Now remember, a parasite is an organism that just takes away from the host without giving anything back. Okay, now when mosquitoes, which is an example of a vector, remember, because they carry the pathogen, but they aren't infected by it. But when they bite us, they leave the Plasmodium, the pathogen, in our bloodstream. Now the body then tries to fight off this pathogen by increasing the fever. Now the problem with this fever is this fever gets very, very high, and it can often end up killing a lot of people. Okay, so in countries where there's a lot of, it doesn't happen everywhere, it only happens in sort of like subtropical countries where it's very, very hot, and they might get a lot of stagnant pools, etc., where a lot of mosquitoes are, and they can carry this Plasmodium, okay, and that can give them malaria. Okay, now let's just imagine all else fails. The skin didn't work, the stomach acid didn't work, the sticky mucus didn't work, the what was the last one? The blood clots don't work, and the pathogen gets into our bloodstream. What happens then? Well, all is not lost, because we still have white blood cells. Now, white blood cells can fight off microorganisms in 2 main ways. Okay, number 1, they engulf the pathogen, and number 2, they make antibodies which lock onto the pathogen and clump them together. Okay, so there are 2 things, engulf or make antibodies. Now we're going to look at the second one in more detail. Okay, now, basically, very quickly, all pathogens have proteins on their surfaces. Okay, so every pathogen has a protein on its surface called an antigen. Now, every antigen or every pathogen has a different antigen on its surface. Now, what the body does is it produces an antibody which locks onto the antigen. Now, if the pathogen has never been seen, okay, so if you've got a completely new pathogen your body has never seen, then it doesn't have any antibodies that can lock onto it, and so you become ill until you can generate the correct antibody for it. Now, this is the first one to remember again. So this is the engulfing bit. Okay, so white blood cells engulf them. You can see that white blood cell, you can see the pathogen, and it's engulfed it, swallowed it. It's got digestive enzymes inside, which obviously eats away at it. Okay, second one is white blood cell produce antibodies. Now, remember what I said about how every single different kind of pathogen has antigens on its surface? Well, that's what these things are. They are proteins, and they're all different, aren't they? You can see this one is triangle shaped, you can see it's square shaped, kind of rounded shaped. Okay, and every pathogen has a different protein on it called an antigen. Now, our bodies produce antibodies which will lock onto an individual pathogen, onto the actual antigen. Okay, and the antibodies are very specific to the different kinds of antigen. Okay, so for example, these antigen will only lock onto, or this antibody will only lock onto this antigen, whereas this antibody will only lock onto this antigen, and this this antibody will only lock onto this antigen. Okay, so they're all quite specific in their own way. So when you get an infection the very first time and your body has never seen it before, it means you've got no antibodies to fit onto the antigen. Okay, and it can carry on dividing. The pathogen will carry on multiplying uncontrolled until your body can produce the right antibody for it. And the white blood cells are like elephants; they never forget. Once they've got the shape of the antigen on lockdown, they will remember it the next time that you have the disease. This is called active immunity. Your body actively remembers the pathogen or the antigen that actually came about. Okay, now, how vaccines work? Now, vaccines work by, so everyone's had a flu jab. Okay, now the flu jab basically works in the way that what they do is whatever pathogen's going around or whatever you want to get vaccinated for, you will kill it by either heating it. So it'll either be dead or very, very weakened. Okay, that's what I mean by inactive, very, very weakened. Then you inject it into your bloodstream. Then the white blood cells treat it as an invader and they'll make antibodies for it. So if the real pathogen comes along, okay, then you'll already have the antibodies for it and to deal with it, so you won't get ill from it. This is called immunity. Okay, active immunity, I like. Okay, passive immunity. Now, everyone's stood on a rusty nail from time to time, although I haven't. But you might risk from, if you do, you might be at risk from the tetanus bacteria, which can multiply really quickly and can make you quite ill. So you won't have the time to develop your own antibodies. Now, if you ever stood in a rusty nail, what you'll do is you'll go into A&E or the walk-in centre or whatever, I don't know. And what they'll do is they'll directly inject the antibodies into your bloodstream to deal with the tetanus bacteria. How is this different from a vaccination? Well, it's different because your body is not producing the antibodies itself. Okay, so you're having someone else's antibodies injected into your bloodstream to deal with it. But the difference is it's very fast acting because the antibodies can get straight away, but it's only short term because the antibodies aren't yours. Your white blood cells haven't actually had to make it. Okay, whereas the first one, okay, with the flu jabs, they're slow to protect and they're long lasting because your body recognizes the dead pathogen and does something about it. Okay. God, this is actually quite tiring, but I'm going to keep going. Okay, now, 5 senses. Now, your body detects changes in stimulus. Okay, now stimulus is things like light, smell, heat, and sound. I've seen some people do past papers and they're not sure what stimulus is. A stimulus is anything that stimulates you. Okay, now your body detects these different stimuluses, or stimuli, I don't know, whichever way you want to say it. Through your ears will detect sound, your eyes will detect the light, nose, smell, your skin will detect heat, and your skin will also detect touch or pressure. Okay, now talking about vision now, what do all of these animals have in common? Okay, I'm not going to wait for you to actually think about it because I've got to try and get through this video as quickly as possible, but you'll notice that all of these animals have eyes at the side of their heads. Now, why do they have eyes at the side of their heads? It's because they'll be able to see predators coming. Okay, these are prey animals. Okay, they're not predators. They need to be able to take evasive action if a predator does come along. So they have eyes at the side of their heads. Okay, so these animals have a better field of vision round the sides instead of in front of them, so they can see their predators coming about. Okay, we call this monocular vision because each eye sees independently. Okay, monocular, mono means one. Okay, and so it sees through each eye separately. Okay, now binocular vision. This is where the eyes are at the front of the head. You can see that. And what happens is these animals are all predator animals, and so the reason why they have eyes at the front of the heads is because it allows them to judge distance. Okay, and judging distance is very important if you're a predator animal and you want to obviously catch your prey. Okay, now, so binocular vision. Yeah, eyes at the front of the heads helps them judge distance. Okay, so I'm just going to skip past through this one. Right, structure of the eye. I'm just going to try and do this really quickly, and I'm just going to press solve. Okay, so this is a diagram of the eye. Okay, this is actually, I'm just going to go through it one by one. Okay, so the iris. Now, the iris is the coloured bit of the eye. Okay, which is right there. Now, what the iris does is it moves up and down to change in the amount of light getting into the eye. So if you're in a very, very bright room, okay, your iris will extend and cover up and limit the amount of light that gets in to prevent damage to your eye. Okay, ciliary muscles. Okay, your ciliary muscles are these ones right here. Okay, now what these will do is they will pull, okay, and relax, and that will change the thickness of this. Okay, now this is obviously the lens, but obviously it's not giving me that one up right now. This is the retina. Okay, now this is a screen that fits on the back of the eye. Okay, and obviously the screen, an image will form on the back of this retina over here. Okay, right, the cornea. Now the cornea is the front part of the eye. You can see that's curved. Now that's what this does, is it helps bend light so it can reach the parts of the lens. Okay, which incidentally is the next one up. Okay, and that is the lens, and it helps focus light that hits perfectly on the back of the retina. And the optic nerve, well, the optic nerve is this one, and what that does is it sends a message to the brain, okay, which is what we want. Okay, right, now this diagram, I don't know if you want to pause it, but I'm not going to re-explain this because this basically just explains all of the different parts of the eye and what they actually does. And you can see the outer cornea refracts. Refracts just basically means bends light. Okay, the pupil, which is the gap right there, so that's the iris and that's the gap. That's the retina screen, which the image will form on, and that's the optic nerve, which sends the image down to the brain. Okay, brilliant. Now, you don't actually have to know about long-sighted and short-sighted, but I'm just going to do this very, very quickly. You can see this person is short-sighted. Okay, when you want to focus on an image under the back of the eye, now we'll go through this. This isn't about short-sighted, long-sighted. This is about how the eye focuses. If the image is far away, okay, and the lens is too thick, the image will form around about here. Okay, but what happens is the lens gets pulled tighter. Okay, and that way it doesn't bend light as much, so it hits perfectly onto the back of the retina. Now, if the image doesn't hit at the back of the retina, then it won't do. I'm just going to do this again. Okay, you see this? It's not forming at the back of the retina, is it? Because the lens is too short. So if you want to look at something very, very far away, what's going to have to happen is the lens is going to have to focus in, okay, and form the image onto the back of the retina. Okay, now if you're looking at something very, very close, okay, again the image isn't being formed on the back of the retina. Okay, what's going to happen is the lens is going to have to thicken up, isn't it? Okay, now what happens is the lens does that. Can you see that the muscles kind of relaxed? Can you see that? Okay, now what happens is the ligaments get slacker and the image forms onto the back of the retina now. Okay, so that's how your lens at the front of your eye can change thickness and make sure that the image forms perfectly onto the back of the retina. Now, I'm not going to do this one because I don't think you have to know it for foundation tier, so I'm just going to move on. Reflexes. Okay, right, reflexes. Now, before I talk about reflexes, we've got to talk about your nervous system. Now, your nervous system is made up of two parts. It's made up of your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. Now, your central nervous system just consists of your brain and your spinal cord. Okay, that is your central, because it's central, isn't it? It's in the middle. It's the most important thing. Okay, it's the brain and the spinal cord that runs through the middle. Central nervous system. Now, all the nerves that go to and from the spinal cord and the brain are called the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral means just on the outside, so it sits on the outside of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so that's what peripheral nervous system is. Now, all nerves are pretty much nerves. We should stop saying nerves, really, because what actually happens is nerves are actually made up of loads of neurons being joined together. Now, the neurons of these things over here, now you have to know the structure of it. Okay, now let's start off from the most important bit, is the nucleus. Every cell has one of those, so that's the nucleus right there. That's the cell body. Okay, so that's where you're going to find all the cytoplasm, etc. These branching bits are called dendrites. Now, these dendrites help this neuron, not nerve. Nerve is loads of them put together. This is going to help this neuron connect to other neurons, okay, to pass on the message. Now, this middle bit over here is called the axon. Okay, now this fatty bit over here is called the sheath. Okay, now it basically just insulates it to help the nerve impulse travel faster. But again, you don't need to know about that, so I'm not going to dwell too much on it. Okay, now this is a motor neuron. Now, a motor neuron would connect the brain, okay, or the spinal cord to the muscle. Okay, hence you think of the muscle as a motor. So if I'm telling my arm to lift up, the message is going to go from my brain to the muscle via the motor neuron. Okay. A sensory neuron is a little bit simpler than this, but this is the basics of a neuron that you have to know about. Now, reflexes. Okay, now with reflexes, the thing about reflexes is they keep you safe. Now, if you've ever touched a hot plate and you've just touched it very, very quickly, okay, you will let go. You won't think about it. You will automatically let go. And the reason why that happens is because it avoids the brain completely. Now, let's look at this in order. I thought the diagram from the book was a pretty good one, so let's use this. So, the hot plate is a stimulus. Okay, that's what's stimulating the skin, okay, which is the pain receptor on the skin, okay, detects it. That sends a message down number 3, which is a sensory neuron. Remember, the sensory neuron senses things and sends a message up. Okay, then that message goes along, and it goes along into this thing over here is the spinal cord. So it's one of your vertebrae, and in there you're going to have a relay neuron. Now, just like a race, in a relay race, which everyone's taken part in, you pass a baton over, don't you? Okay, now that's exactly what this is doing. You've touched the hot plate, the impulse travels along the sensory neuron, goes down a relay neuron, which straight away relays the message, which means passes on the message directly, okay, to the motor neuron. Now, as I've just said, the motor neuron connects to the muscle, which then contracts. Now, whatever muscle needs to contract is called the effector. Okay, in this case, we want to pull our hand away from the hot plate, and so the effector is going to be our bicep, and our response is going to be moving, okay, the hand away. Now, that is all one reflex. By the way, all of this happens without the brain, so it doesn't involve the brain at all, but the brain is notified to let you know that you've been involved in a reflex action, because it doesn't want you to repeat the silly thing that you did when you touched that hot plate. Now, a diagram form of this, okay, is this one. Okay, this basically summarizes this over here, but you have to know what in the exam they may give you this, but they may take out some of these and ask you to fill in the blanks. Okay, so it starts off from a stimulus, okay, which was the hot plate. Okay, then it might go to receptor, which is pain receptors in the skin. Then it will go to the sensory neuron, which is this neuron right here. Then it may go to the relay neuron, not may, it will. It will go to the relay neuron, which is right here in the spinal cord. Okay, then go down to the motor neuron. Then go down to the motor neuron, which the motor neuron connects the relay neuron to the actual muscle. Okay, then to the effector, which is the organ that's going to have the response on. In this, at our case, it was the bicep. Then the effector, which is the bicep, and then it's going to go. And then you're going to have your response, which is moving your arm away. Okay, and that is reflexes. So don't forget, reflexes are fast. They happen so quickly because you don't want for them to be very slow. In that case, it could harm you. Okay, they're automatic. Yeah, there's not something that happens what you think about. They're automatic, and they are involuntary. It means you cannot do anything about them. okay, because they avoid the brain completely, and that way they can keep you out of danger. Touch something hot, pull your hand away, okay? It's fast, it's involuntary, it's automatic. Yeah, so that is reflexes. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here for video A. I think that's long enough. In the second lesson, I'm going to go through alcohol, etc. I'm going to go through drugs, alcohol, what else am I going to do? Smoking, homeostasis, and I'm also going to talk about phototrophic, geotrophic, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye-bye.